Today is the 40th anniversary of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. So I have a book called A True Book, Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. This is a nonfiction book, so we're going to learn all about Mount St. Helens. Enjoy. Why make a volcanic monument? So first I want to show you this map here of Washington State. This is Spokane, right over here on the Idaho border. And right down here southwest of Seattle, near the Oregon border, is where Mount St. Helens is located. So that gives you an idea where it is compared to us. Why make a volcanic monument? Do you know what a volcanic eruption is? A volcano is a mountain with openings called vents. When a volcano erupts, hot gases, rocks, ash, and lava can be thrown out of its vent. A volcanic eruption can destroy much of the land, wildlife, and plants that surround the volcano. Can you imagine how long it might take for the plants and animals to return to an area after a volcano erupts? Well, neither could the scientists who study volcanoes. But on May 18, 1980, a volcano in southwest Washington called Mount St. Helens erupted. Now, scientists have a place to study how nature renews itself after a volcano erupts. It is called Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. You can go there and see it for yourself. I want to show you the picture and read you the caption. It says, a scientist uses special equipment to track animals in the monument. So I'm looking at that device she's using, and I'm wondering how that tracks animals. Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument is 110,000 acres, about twice the size of Washington, D.C. The monument includes Mount St. Helens and much of the area that was destroyed by the 1980 eruption. The United States Congress established the monument in 1982. Before Mount St. Helens erupted, it was a beautiful mountain that stood 9,677 feet high. Its snow-covered sides sloped down to a thick forest. At the mountain's northern base lay Spirit Lake. Snow-fed rivers flowed through the forest. In the summer, campers fished in the lake and hiked along the tree-lined trails. Here's a picture of Mount St. Helens and Spirit Lake before the mountain erupted. And I showed you a picture of the lake and the mountain in one of our class meetings as well, similar to that one. The mountain erupts. As Mount St. Helens erupted, the white snow on the mountain was covered by gray ash. So that's this picture here. At 8:32 a.m. on May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. A powerful earthquake beneath the mountain caused a landslide. Masses of snow, ice, and rock slid down one side of the mountain. The landslide, called an avalanche, was the largest in history. Parts of the avalanche fell into Spirit Lake. It caused a huge wave to wash up from the lake onto the surrounding hills. The wave toppled giant trees. As the wave fell back into the lake, it carried many of the fallen trees with it. So I want you to see this picture. This is a picture of the mountain after it erupted with Spirit Lake in the foreground. And it says, when the eruption was over, about 1,300 feet of the mountain was gone, and Spirit Lake was covered with fallen trees. So there's all those trees that the author was just talking about. Another part of the avalanche plunged 14 miles down a river valley. In some places, the rocks, ash, and chunks of ice were 600 feet deep. Meanwhile, a blast of ash and hot gases zoomed away from the mountain like a rocket. Near the mountain, the blast traveled at about 650 miles per hour. The gases were heated to 550 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt a tin can. On the mountainsides, snow and ice that had been melted by the hot gases mixed with ash and formed a giant mass of mud. The mud flowed down the mountain and into the rivers that led away from the mountain. A dark cloud of ash rose 16 miles into the sky above the mountain. Part of the cloud was carried away by winds. It traveled east toward Montana and north into Canada. I thought it was interesting during our Zoom with a scientist that Annika said that the ash flew as far away as Detroit. So they had a really thin coating of ash on their cars in Detroit. After the eruption. Soon after Mount St. Helens erupted, scientists began to explore the area they called the blast zone. The scientists found a huge hole or crater in the mountain. Almost 1,300 feet of the mountaintop had been blown away by the blast. So in these pictures, I'm going to read the caption. The top photograph shows Mount St. Helens and the surrounding area, including Spirit Lake, before the eruption. The bottom photograph shows the same area after the eruption. Notice that all of the trees and grasses are gone, the hills are flattened, and most of the mountaintop is blown off. So if you look at the landscape here, you can see that here's one of the edges of the mountain. So here's the edge, of the hillside. Here's one of the hillsides, and here's that same hillside with the mountain in the background. So you can see the before and after right there. Cool picture. The blast zone was enormous. It covered an area of about 150,000 acres. The land was covered with gray ash. Steam from melting chunks of ice rose above the rocks and ash. On the surrounding hills, trees as tall as 200 feet had been broken into millions of tiny, sharp pieces. Other trees, blown down by the volcano's blast, laid like matchsticks in the ash. The entire area was very quiet. There was no birds to sing or insects to buzz. When Mount St. Helens erupted, 200 bears, 5,000 deer, and 1,500 elk were killed. 57 people who were near the volcano were also killed. It looked like all of the life in the blast zone had been destroyed. This picture says dead trees in the blast zone. Dead trees littered the ground in the blast zone. Harry R. Truman. Harry R. Truman was 83 years old in 1980. He lived in a lodge at Spirit Lake. Oh, my soda's gone. In March 1980, scientists thought that Mount St. Helens would erupt soon. The area was dangerous. People who lived in that area left, but Harry refused to leave his home. For 2 months, Harry was interviewed on television. School children wrote letters to Harry asking him to leave his lodge so he would be safe. One Saturday, some friends visited Harry. They hoped to convince him to leave, but Harry said no. The next morning, Mount St. Helens erupted. Harry and his lodge were buried under the rocks and ash. Harry's death was sad, but many people still remember him. Here's some pictures of Harry Truman. During the months after the eruption, scientists began to find survivors. In the surrounding mountains, snow had sheltered many of the trees and huckleberry bushes. The snow shelter protected the trees and bushes from the direct path of the blast. Thick layers of ice that covered the lakes high in the mountains had protected the fish and frogs underwater. Insect nests that were underground or were inside decaying, rotting logs had survived too. And mice, moles, and gophers began to poke their noses through the ash. They had been safe in their underground burrows. Insects, including grasshoppers, survived the eruption because their nests were safe underground. Colors return. At first, no plants could grow in the ash, but soon the moles and gophers became the blast zone's gardeners. Their underground tunneling mixed ash from above the ground with rich soil from below. This helped to make tiny holes for seeds that were blown in on the wind. The seeds landed in the holes and began to grow. Scientists thought nothing could grow in the deep ash that covered the blast zone. As gophers began to tunnel beneath the ground, they helped to make the soil rich so plants could grow. And if you look in this picture right here, you'll see a little gopher right hiding in that hole. Finally, in the summer of 1981, the colors began to dot the gray land. First came the pink-flowered thistles and the bright red fireweed. Then rain began to wash away the ash that was covering the roots of the plants. As a result, many more plants were able to grow. Huckleberries and thimbleberries sprouted. Blue lupin and white avalanche lilies bloomed. Green ferns grew on the roots of overturned trees. So this picture shows you fireweed, one of the first plants to regrow in the blast zone, brought color back to the area. That's going to be the top picture. The picture on the left is the white blooms of avalanche lilies were a welcome sight in the devastated blast zone. So there's fireweed and avalanche lilies. Bugs and birds return. After the mountain erupted, scientists set